Happy, beautiful Wednesday afternoon. Man, it feels awesome outside today. Got some good news. Our internet finally got connected today, so we're excited. Hopefully, our internet will be so much better and the morning worship online experience will be much more stable. That's been the missing link in this whole thing for that, so we're excited, very, very excited about that. So, for tonight's devotional, we're going to be in Luke 17 verses 1 through 10. That's where we're going to be if you want to go ahead and get there. But you may not know this, but for quite a while, I was a youth pastor. And inevitably, when you're around teenagers, you end up refereeing arguments, disagreements between people. And sometimes they can be highly emotional people. So fast forward, and now I'm not a youth pastor anymore. I mainly serve adults. And you might ask, what's the difference between serving in youth ministry and serving in adult ministry? And my answer to that is about 10 years. There's not a whole lot of difference. And we saw that in the debate last night, right? Like, what happens when we keep up the cycle of I'm going to give back to them exactly what they give to me. I'm going to talk louder, I'm going to talk longer, I'm going to hurl insults, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, I'm going to accuse. So how do we break this cycle, and how is there an escape? Is there an escape button? Is there an exit from what seems to be an infinite loop? And I hope that you find what I discovered to be true in God's word today. We're in Luke chapter 17, verses 1 through 10. Verses 1 through 3 says this. One day Jesus said to his disciples, "There will always be temptations to sin, but what sorrow awaits the person who does the tempting?" What sorrow awaits the person who does the tempting? That is, look out. It would be better to be thrown into the sea with a millstone hung around your neck than to cause one of these little ones to fall into sin. So watch yourselves. What is he saying? He's saying in the chaos that we're all in, because temptation is always around, it's always part of the picture until Jesus comes back, all right? We cannot cause others to sin because there are serious consequences. And especially when he talks about little ones, he means those who are either young in the faith or actually small children. So if you're a leader in ministry, if you're a leader of your family, that's your biggest ministry. We have to take very seriously what we do with our kids, with our family. And I know that's not easy. I got two teenagers still at home. I know it's not easy, but I also know God helps you, and it's possible. The second part of verse 3 and 4 says this: "If another believer sins, rebuke that person. Then, if there is repentance, forgive. Even if that person wrongs you 7 times a day, and each time turns and asks for forgiveness, you must forgive." So we are to correct. That's what rebuke means, to point out what's wrong and give a corrective action. Don't just say that's wrong and you're an idiot. Point it out and then say, here's grace for that. Or your brother. Some translations may say your brother. But the whole picture is this idea of family, that we're supposed to be taking care of one another. We're supposed to be respecting one another. And even if someone keeps burning us, that doesn't mean we keep trusting them in the same way, but we just keep letting that debt go, that we just keep releasing them into God's hands and letting him do what he's going to do, and hopefully they'll find the forgiveness that they need and the freedom so that they will not keep going on the crazy cycle. He says to keep forgiving and to not even keep score, because when we keep score, we lose. We lose when we do that. So the apostles in verse 5, the apostles said to the Lord, "Show us how to increase our faith." Why would they say that? Because he just told them, if someone wrongs you 7 times a day and they keep coming back after every time asking you for forgiveness, you've got to forgive them. oh man, I'm going to need big faith for that. I'm going to need mountain-sized faith for that. I mean, that's you're asking too much, right? Like you can imagine the disciples thinking that, because in their culture, if you forgave somebody 3 times, you were like at the upper echelons of holy people. Like you are really looking past people's people's wrongs, and you are overlooking the offenses that they threw your way. But Jesus says, no, no, no. We don't stop at 3, and we don't even keep track. We just keep forgiving so that they will find the grace that you found. And that's really where we're going. We look at verse 6. The Lord answered after they said, show us how to increase our faith. The Lord answered, if you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, may you be uprooted and thrown into the sea, and it would obey you. We always think of that. That is this incredible image. And of course, my mind always goes to like the Force or magic or something where we could just say the words and, you know, some inanimate object moves. Is that really what he's talking about? He says it's not the amount of your faith, but where is your faith? It should be in our great God, not on you trying to conjure up, you know, more belief or more faith. If you could say to a tree, be uprooted and it would be thrown into the sea, if you had that small, minuscule amount of faith that it takes for that, then you could forgive. It's not about concentrating more. It's not about focusing more. It's not about trying to believe more. Jesus is saying we can forgive. You can forgive because you need to realize you've been forgiven. And Jesus is always bringing the apostles back to this. It's always kind of this idea of don't forget where you came from. Don't forget that you too need grace in your life. Don't forget that you too are going to need grace in your life. I know that's true. But it's easy to get caught up in the cycle of chaos and give as good as you got, right? We see that all the time. So what does Jesus call us to do? And we're looking at our last 3 verses for the night. It's verses 7 through 10. When a servant comes in from plowing or taking care of his sheep, does his master say, come in and eat with me? No, he says, prepare my meal, put on your apron, and serve me while I eat. Then you can eat later. And does the master thank the servant for doing what he was told to do? Of course not. In the same way, when you obey me, you should say, we are unworthy servants who have simply done our duty. He says following him is really just about obeying him, that it's about being faithful with the gifts and abilities that he's given. It's about being content, knowing that it's enough that he forgave us so that we can forgive others, so that when we do things for him, it's not like we're trying to earn our way in. It's not like we're trying to climb some sort of ladder. That's the key. There is no ladder. You just do what he says. And when I read this, I just have to tell you, I struggle with this verse. I struggle because my love language is words of affirmation. Like when someone says, this is where you got it right. This is where you nailed it. That's just fuel in my tank, right? And for other people, their love language is gifts. Like if they receive a gift, that's affirmation to them. That's showing worth to them. For some people, it's quality time, and some people it's acts of service. And I forgot what the 5th one is, but you know, we like to know where we stand, right? You know, we like to know, are we underperforming? Are we meeting, or are we exceeding expectations? And you know, there are many of us who we want to exceed expectations. We don't want to just we don't want to scrape by and do the bare minimum. We want to exceed expectations. But the problem is we can easily fall into the pit of comparison. And it's just an unhealthy place to live. You know, it's where we say, woe is me. Here is all I do for God. And you make your mental list of all these things as if it's some sort of offering to God. And we wonder, is he paying attention to me? Is he looking at like everything that I'm doing for him? Doesn't he notice? So what Jesus is saying, he's not saying that we're worth less than other people. He's not saying we're just scrubs, right? He's trying to get our mental focus on where it should be. He's trying to reproduce his character in us. Remember, it says in Ephesians chapter 2 that even Jesus, though he was equal with God, didn't consider that, he didn't cling on to that status. Like, he let that go to become a servant to others. So Jesus is not asking us to do anything that he himself did not do when he was obedient to the Father. So we're not saying that our lives don't matter. They do. Life is a gift. It should be enjoyed and lived for the glory of God. He's not saying we should practice self-hate or loathe ourselves. But what Jesus is saying is we need to recognize God's authority over us, that we realize he is really the sovereign one in the world. But mostly, we need to recognize how gracious he's been to us. And I know that that's easy for me to forget, but grace should be the theme of our Christian lives. Like, our heart should beat to the rhythm of God's grace. Forgiveness, like if we had a life soundtrack and forgiveness was a song, that should be repeat over and over and come back to over and over. Because humility comes when we rightly see ourselves the way that God sees us. Remember, he is the creator and we are the created, not the other way around. He sought us. He's the one that forgave us. And so now, because we've been forgiven, we can also forgive others. See, God does not owe us anything, nothing. We're the ones that owe him. So when we begin to realize that, he begins to cultivate this heart that's humble, this heart that's teachable, this heart that isn't just about looking out for number one, this heart that just says, I don't have to have all the right answers all the time. I don't have to get you to do what I want you to do. I don't have to, get you to bend to my will. And once we start seeing that character developed in us, once we start seeing that humility growing in us, Jesus is the one that's growing it. We're going to start to see how that affects all of our relationships. And it's going to be for the glory of God. And it's going to be for the good of people around us. So look forward to seeing you Sunday in person. I hope that you'll come back, or online if you are just absolutely unable. In the meantime, grace and peace.